What you're looking at right now is a 60-minute Overwatch game, and one of the players has a KD of 33. You're probably wondering when looking at this, how did this even happen? And the only answer I have for you is total mayhem. Total Mayhem in Overwatch 2 is completely broken, and it has come far from its origins in Overwatch 1, which was dominated mostly by the off-tanks and some of the spammier DPS. But as you'd imagine, because of the tank reworks in Overwatch 2, some characters are a lot better than others. So much so that the meta of Total Mayhem has completely revolved around 3 characters specifically. These 3 characters take advantage of the stat changes that Total Mayhem has the best. Specifically, that cooldowns are reduced by 75%, ultimates charge 50% faster, and everybody has double their health. The first of these 3 characters is Moira. Already in normal Overwatch, Moira is a very slippery hero who can be incredibly challenging to actually catch and kill. In Total Mayhem, this becomes an extremity, with Moira's fade cooldown at only 1.5 seconds. Even with the entire team focusing her, it could be the most challenging thing to find and actually catch and kill a Moira with her disappearing every few seconds. When you do see a Moira though, she's going to be constantly healing herself and her teammates by spamming her biotic orb, which is also on a very low cooldown. Ironically, one of Moira's greatest weaknesses is her ultimate ability, which makes her very vulnerable, not being able to use fade at all during its duration. Additionally, due to her squishy health bar, she's vulnerable to some one-shot ults, such as Riptire and High Noon. The next hero in our tier list is Doomfist, and unlike Moira, who reaches S tier by the sheer value of her abilities alone, Doomfist reaches S tier due to his possession of an incredibly powerful mechanic, Green Health. So the thing about Green Health is, unlike many other self-heal abilities, Green Health is instant, which is a really big deal because it means you aren't stuck in an animation like Roadhog is during Take a Breather. This also means it can be spammed, and aided by massively reduced cooldowns, allows you to reach absurd life totals. Another massive plus is the fact that it completely negates anti-heal, which otherwise can be incredibly deadly to all other characters. A number of heroes in Overwatch feature Green Health in some way. Doom has it in his passive, the Best Defense, which will grant him Green Health whenever he strikes an enemy with his abilities. Of course, with all his cooldowns reduced significantly, and with the addition of multi-man punches in Overwatch 2, Doomfist becomes an absolute menace. Combine this with a kit filled with mobility, his block, which prevents him from getting one-shot by big ultimates such as Diva Bomb, his ultimate, which grants him a get-out-of-jail-free card, and you have a ludicrously powerful and unkillable hero that will contest the point or stop them from pushing the cart for as long as you really need him to. So we've talked about Green Health, but another incredibly powerful mechanic in Total Mayhem is CC and Knockback. This may seem too obvious to point out on its own. After all, isn't CC already a very powerful thing in normal Overwatch, so much so they had to take it out for Overwatch 2? Well, no, and stop talking like that, because listen, the impact of CC gets turned up to an unreal level for Total Mayhem. There's a joke that me and my friends have that Total Mayhem doesn't actually start until overtime, and honestly, it's not far off from the truth, because if you and your opponents are playing to win, you're probably going to spend a vast majority of the game in overtime. And here is where CC becomes so important. Just by looking at these first 2 heroes, you probably have a good idea of just how unkillable most of these heroes are in Total Mayhem. And here, CC becomes even more valuable, because rather than kill your opponents, it's going to be much easier to just push them off of the objective, especially considering overtime gets easier the longer it goes on. So we have one more slot in S tier, and here is our criteria for a hero to fill it. First, the hero needs to be mobile. Surviving isn't just having a lot of HP. In Total Mayhem, a lot of it is being able to not take any damage at all. It needs to have Green Health. With abilities like Anti-Grenade being on such a low cooldown, our hero needs to be able to sustain itself without threat of being anti-healed at all. And third, it needs to have some great CC to knock tanks off the payload or capture point, and ideally, it should also have a very impactful ultimate. And that is how we land on the 3rd hero for the S tier. When initially creating this tier list, I honestly considered putting Wrecking Ball in a tier of his own, because he genuinely is the most insane abomination I've ever seen in any official Overwatch game mode. Wrecking Ball has literally everything you need, and more if you ask me. With 1,100 base HP and being able to gain up to an additional 600 green health every 3.75 seconds by using his E, I don't think anything will ever compare to what he looks like. I've even seen a Wrecking Ball's HP get as high as in the 3000s due to the 9-second expiration cooldown of the health being reset. At a certain point when playing Wrecking Ball, the enemy team will just give up on trying to kill you. It's even relatively common to see games finished with Wrecking Balls not even dying once, and it has nothing to do with your skill on the character whatsoever. Your only true threat is dying to the environment, such as being charged off the map by a Reinhardt or occasional random bullshit of CC stun locking. Your largest threat, however, is being knocked off of the objective, and unfortunately, Wrecking Ball comes with a number of tools to absolutely dominate the point. First off, of course, his Wrecking Ball, which is incredibly effective at knocking enemies back and giving you a split-second opportunity to progress the objective. His hook also allows him to stay tethered to the point and keep the contest going. His Slam, which knocks enemies up, is also another great CC aspect of his kit. His ultimate, though, is absolutely amazing. We've talked about CC, green health, and mobility, but the next most important mechanic to Total Mayhem is zoning, and Wrecking Ball possesses perhaps the most powerful zoning tool in the game, Minefield. Even with the massive health bars of Total Mayhem, Wrecking Ball's Minefield still presents a massive threat which can absolutely destroy any enemy squishies and significantly put a damper on the opposing team's tanks. These three heroes are by far the most powerful, and anyone who has played more than a few games of Total Mayhem knows this. Naturally, I'm sure you're not surprised to know that these three heroes absolutely dominate the meta, with at least one or two of these heroes being on every team I've played against and every team I've played with. This is a massive effect on what's good to play, or even what's viable. It's for this reason that I feel the need to discuss them first. They are frankly as essential to the Total Mayhem experience as the doubled health and reduced cooldowns are, and their mere presence can make certain heroes frankly unplayable. Speaking of which, Widowmaker starts off the F tier on our list. Widow in this game mode really has no redeeming qualities whatsoever. Even her fully charged one-shot headshot cannot kill most full health squishies, even the squishiest of squishies. And even if it did, it wouldn't really matter because you aren't going to be seeing many squishies in this game mode at all. Otherwise, her kit offers zero utility. Even her ultimate is useless since you can almost always see all 5 of the enemy team on the payload. I mean, that's where they're going to be anyway. Joining Widow in the F tier is Genji, Soldier, Ashe, and Sojourn. These characters are all, respectfully, useless. Again, they really have no redeeming qualities, and they simply do not have enough DPS to kill characters like Doom and Ball. They also don't really have any utility either. To be fair, that is the pattern we're going to start noticing with most of the DPS in the game. Now in our D tier, we have a much more interesting cast. Here you'll find a bunch of characters which have meaningful and impactful ults, but the characters are otherwise pretty bad. Unlike the F tier, some of these characters you can maybe justify playing from time to time, just because of these ults and how satisfying they can be, such as Cassidy. High Noon is the only ability in the game that can one-shot even the tankiest of characters, and although about 90% of the time it doesn't work out, he gets into D tier because the 10% of the time you take a game-winning fight off of his ult. Similarly, we have Sombra and Hanzo. Sombra's percent health damage is incredibly meaningful in this game mode, and Hanzo's Dragon can be a great area denial tool, especially on payload maps. Also in D tier, we have Ana, Echo, Mercy Reaper, Lucio, Junkrat, and Torb. Now we're at a tier of characters which I can comfortably say are not bad. They aren't good, mind you, but no one's going to be reporting you for locking these guys in. Here, you'll find some of the shittier tanks in Zarya, D.Va, and Winston. Also Brig is here. These guys are all around pretty decent. They all are tanky and have some decent abilities to protect themselves, or at least self-heal, such as D.Va Recall Mech, Winston Primal, Zarya Bubble, or Brig Passive. They also have some pretty decent ults. Zarya ult can be really powerful with the right combo. D.Va Bomb can potentially wipe the point, or a combo with Zarya, and Winston ult turns him into a knockback machine, which we already talked about how important that is. And then there's Brig ult. Still as useless as it is in the real game though. So if you've been following along, in the perfect comp so far, we have 3 OP heroes with Ball, Doom, and Moira. But that means we still need 2 more heroes to finish off the team. And for the most part, these 2 last heroes will be chosen from this tier that we're about to talk about. So the first character in our A tier is Junker Queen. In Total Mayhem, she's able to get great value out of her passive due to the reduced cooldown on her ability Carnage, which will completely reset its cooldown after hitting just 1 enemy. So you get a lot of healing from that passive when you're doing that much damage with Carnage, not even to mention her knife. The constant fighting on the point also allows her to get additional value with it because there's always going to be people there to E at. Also, she does have a Brig Rally on a 4-second cooldown in her commanding shout, which is just ridiculous if you ask me. And then she also has anti-heal with her ultimate, which is obviously pretty useful. And then next we have Reinhardt. Now Reinhardt was a particularly challenging hero to place because although he is a tank, he has absolutely no way to heal himself. He does, however, have a ton of utility. His ultimate is amazing, with so many high mobility and hard to catch heroes like Moira being common. Earthshatter is one of the only consistent ways to kill them, or at least, catch them. His charge is also amazing. It can be a great tool to get hard to kill heroes like Ball and Doom off the point. You just have to be careful that Doom doesn't counter your charge. But he can also keep them stun locked. You can even kill heroes like this by charging them off of certain maps. Sigma gets into the A tier for basically one reason alone, and you'd think it's because of Flux, because obviously Graphitic Flux is a pretty good ultimate to have in a game mode like this, but it's way better than you'd think it is, because it's one of the only ways to actually end the match, because a Sig 9, as they call it, is a consistent way to actually end overtime if it's been long enough. Next, we have Roadhog. Now, you may be wondering, what's the point of picking a hog if you can't one-shot anybody? Well, he doesn't really need to because he could just keep hooking them. His hook in Total Mayhem is on a 2-second cooldown, and with some practice, you could chain these hooks together and potentially take some of the incredibly overpowered heroes like Doomfist and Ball out of the game, at least temporarily. In addition to this, he has a great ultimate. Its knockback, which is often a downside in normal Overwatch, is amazing here. Topping this all off, Roadhog has his E, which is a pretty good self-sustained tool. Orisa is by far the best hero in A tier, and honestly, you can make a pretty good argument for putting her in S. She's got a ton of CC, her shift gives her green health, and also makes her CC immune. There is not a single other ability in the game that doesn't affect like this, and since CC is so important in this game mode, being able to completely negate it a majority of the time is absolutely huge. Mei is next. Now, it should be no surprise that the most tank-like DPS is the best DPS in a game mode that's dominated by tanks. Unlike every other DPS, Mei is absolutely chock full with survivability and utility. Her wall in Total Mayhem has practically zero downtime. Combine this with her ice block, which is a great survivability tool, and of course, her absolutely massive ultimate, which forces the enemy team to DPS check you, as they are forced to stay frozen on point, rather than give up the objective. Okay, so now that you know who to play, it's time to queue up for a game of Total Mayhem. But how do you actually win? Since we talked about these games going for actual hours, and most of it is grueling and chaotic, what actually ends these matches? And the easiest way to answer that question is to say, get defense. I hate to say it, but this mode isn't fair in the slightest. I know I've waited until 11 minutes and 15 seconds to tell you this, but still, queuing for Total Mayhem at the end of the day is a complete coin toss and shouldn't be regarded as any more. I seriously cannot stress enough how unbelievably difficult it is to win on attack. On defense, in overtime, you have to get the enemy team off of the point just one time to win. However, on attack, you have to get the entire enemy team off of the point, unironically, hundreds of times. Winning a game of Total Mayhem on attack is an endeavor that takes hours of your time, but on the rare occasion that you somehow manage to pull away a victory on attack, these are the ways in which you would accomplish that. The first is waiting for the enemy team to leave, and this is by far the most consistent way to win as an attacker, because if a big stack of 3 or 4 players leaves, you have a chance to make some serious progress while backfillers come in. The second way is to win by technicality, because if the server shuts down, which it often does, thank you Blizzard, then technically you didn't lose, and if you didn't lose, you could just say that you won. You could also just hope and pray that the enemy team will C9, or that they are kind enough to try to play a 5 DPS comp into the Exodia that is yours. I mean, it's not perfect, but I mean, it happens sometimes. And the last way to win on attack is random bullshit. No, but seriously, that actually is all you need to know about Total Mayhem. Like, this is the end of the video. Now go out there and win some Total Mayhem games, or at least spend a lot of time trying to do it. But in all seriousness, if you guys did enjoy this video, a like or a comment or even a subscription is incredibly appreciated. But that's about it, and I will see you guys later.